important topic, commodity value chain creation through AgriNet and Agri AI. Over to you, Mr. Gavaghan.
Thank you so much, Professor Moni. That was a very, very brilliant, and really appreciate the very warm introduction. It's a very great honor to speak at this event, and I hope everyone that is watching can learn and we can capitalize on such an amazing market and such an amazing network as well as technology that we are constantly missing in all these areas that we say that we can use, but yet we don't. We don't utilize them to the best of our ability. So this presentation is about the commodity value chain creation. What that means, of course, is that through commodities, agriculture commodities specifically, we find the value from the start of the production, and that means of the planting of the commodity all the way to the end user, to the food on your table. And that is, of course, through creation of value through each area of the supply chain, and using and capitalizing on traditional agriculture networks and new agriculture networks that are emerging due to the pandemic, due to the issues that are currently in Europe at the moment, as well as agriculture AI. Utilizing all these, we can then create something magnificent. As Professor Moni said, that we're connecting the dots to a $1 trillion+ agriculture network and agriculture AI, as well as a market. It's an amazing market that we still have not yet fully utilized, that we have not fully captured. And it is, what I find amazing is that it's consistently growing due to the fact of utilizing technology in a creative manner. So we talk about the global supply chain, how the pandemic has affected every single country, and how now people in nations are thinking, how can we change up our supply chain, our global supply chain? How can we make new avenues? Do we de-escalate globalization and bring everything back, or do we increase it? And that is a brilliant question of, do we follow the old ways and see what happens, or do we grow everything? Do we take a step back and grow everything and start to move everything differently? Because as the pandemic has shown, that with technology, anything is possible. We've seen how even just this webinar series, that we're able to touch not just one country, but multiple countries all at one time. And it's an amazing thing that either we use StreamYard or whether we use Zoom or Teams, we can connect people together. And that is, of course, what supply chains do. We connect a supplier and the end user, whether it be yourself or whether it be the different countries or different areas of the world. That is what we do. Then we go to the commodity chain. The commodity chain being the product. How do we produce it? Where does it come from? How can we create the value from just a seedling, or even better yet, the soil? Taking it back even a step further, that we haven't produced anything just yet, but as Professor Moni said, the analytics of soil degradation, if that's the case, or whether it be weather, whether it be the changing climate, whether it be the rainfall, whether it be the issues from a different country affecting another country. So analyzing what happens during that whole entire process, what is the chain, what can be the domino effect, and what is the domino effect if one domino, if it's earlier or later, is either removed or it moves very quickly. The third part of it is education is key. And why is that? Well, when we're talking about Agri network, we can talk about e-commerce. We can talk about just face-to-face interactions. Two very different ways of interaction, whether it be through WhatsApp, whether it be with Zoom, or whether it be a participant of a supplier flying over to a different country to the end buyer or the end users. But how do we do that? Well, that was education. To be able to build the planes, we need to be educated. To be able to build the ships, we need to be educated. To be able to plant and make sure that the seedling grows into whether it be wheat, soybean, whether it be coffee or corn, or the plethora of agriculture products that we eat and use on a daily basis, education was there. And the reason why it is absolutely key is because if we do not have that, we cannot create value. Education is the foundation of where we start, of the global supply chain, where we start with the commodity chain. Because without having that knowledge, without having a great foundation, then we cannot have the chain move forward. And at the end of the day, what can be done? What can be done with technology? What can be done through webinars like this, as well as the collaborative effort? As much as we will say that we want to have everything homegrown, we didn't build society. We did not build the globe by being a one-man army. And why I say that? Well, one country can't build itself. Trade has always been part of every society throughout the ages. And it's something that technology has advanced immensely, from whether it be Amazon or Alibaba through their marketplaces for products of technology, such as TVs or phones, or even just clothes on our back. They created a whole entire market, a digital market. But we have not done that for commodities in such a way that gives it security. There are plethora of platforms, but again, they aren't as secure as what we deem them as. And as we maneuver through this decade that is wrought with pitfalls, as we've just faced a pandemic and still going through it, as well as the onset of war through the Ukraine and Russian conflict, we need to create and understand each other, as well as be able to create newer paths on how we either self-sustain or how we recalibrate our collaborations. Because without collaborations, we will not be able to create the true value of what we can do. And when I say collaborations, well, collaboration of the sun and water, those are the collaborations through a seedling, whether it be the collaboration of technology and nature, two totally different things, but yet when combined together can create magnificent results. And we've seen that. We can see that with automated farming. We can see that with detecting the weather patterns, the wind patterns, whether we can detect if the soil is too much carbon, whether there's too much sulfur, whether there's too much of anything within it, as well as using digital twinning, where we can, instead of going out there and actually planning and then seeing what happens, we can take a step back, analyze the area, analyze where we're going to build our farm, analyze where the weather patterns are, where the pollution is going to go to. And we can then analyze where that plot of land, that hectare or that acreage, we can understand that that's going to be the area in which we're going to plant something of quality. Then we can add the quantity. Then we can understand that, okay, we can only be in these barriers because of if we trail a bit further, the soil isn't as pure as it should be. And this will be the talk. This will be through our talk. But of course, we must first step back and talk about the global supply chain. Now, as you all know, that the global supply chain from the end of 2019, and it was the end of 2019, there started to be some faults. And that was, well, we could see from the technology standpoint of semiconductor issues. Throughout 2019 and then beginning into 2020, we could see that semiconductors, the things that we have in our PCs, things that we use in our daily lives that we don't realize, there's very, very small chips that we have in our phones, that we have in our laptops, that we have on our gaming machines, or whether it be even part of our iPads, that started to have a shortage. And then we understood that, well, 2020 came along and the pandemic started, and that exacerbated the supply chain. We could see now that economies, because of being globalized, relied upon other countries too much instead of having a backup plan, making sure that we could secure farming, secure production, we could secure something that we could produce. It wasn't always saying that we could hand over the reins over production or producing, but it was always a backup plan. But as we've seen, and just this week, where India banned wheat exports as the heat wave hurt massive amounts of crops, you could see that pricing shot up of wheat. But before that, at the start of this year, when the Russian and Ukraine conflict happened, wheat shot up again. We could see as well with soybean, when Brazil announced that, again, another heat wave hit them very, very dramatically and very, very hard. Soybean prices shot through the roof. But this over-reliance of countries, of course, their speciality is producing these commodities. The globe didn't realize that we always should have a backup plan. There should always be a just-in-case factor. And this is where, of course, small producers and small suppliers can fill in the gaps. This is where small farmers can now become the behemoths through cooperative farming. But we'll talk about that a bit later on. As we know as well, in 2021, we saw the Suez Canal block. And we see that, of course, that cost not just billions of dollars of money to be thrown away every single hour to every single day that the Suez Canal was blocked, but as well getting products to countries in the southern hemisphere, it cost them a lot, from not being able to feed their nation to not being able to supply any country with products because of that blockage. That stopped not just oil, not just agriculture, but at least half of the southern hemisphere. And even that, logistics is still an amazing and very important part of the global supply chain, and it is part of creating value chain. Because without logistics, without getting it in just in time, or whether it be at the right price, it can't happen. And as we see now, and with the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, the LNG, liquid natural gas, has shot right up of how to produce it as well as how to transport it. And the numbers were, in 2020, it cost $10 million to hire a ship. That wasn't to put it into the ship, but to actually just hire the specialized ship. When it came to 2022, that shot up to about $291 million USD, of course, to nearly 300 of that. So high container freights, that doesn't include the ones that require refrigeration. That is still costing quite a lot of money. And that's not just one nation, but every single nation. It affects everyone. But again, how can we stop that? Well, that's where we take a step back and we say, well, we can produce things at our country. There's always alternatives. And that word alternatives in the global market sometimes offends people. And why does it offend people? Well, it's similar to that of having a group of friends together and saying that you're only going to exclusively hang out with a friend, and the other group get offended. And it's, well, maybe the other group is, we'll say, busy. Maybe they're taking care of their father. Maybe they're taking care of their son or daughter. You can't spend time with them. But a lot of nations get offended when they say, "Oh, we found an alternative trading partner." We shouldn't have that reaction to when we said we found alternative ways, because finding alternative ways does not always mean that it's going to be 100% the right way, or even 100% the correct way of this partnership. Sometimes partnerships fail even before they cross even before they line up on the starting line. Sometimes it's halfway through the race. Sometimes it's at the end. Sometimes it's when the product has been delivered, and that's when consequences emerge. So when we say there's alternative ways in the supply chain, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to say we're going to rely upon this country or we're going to rely upon ourselves. It's just saying that we've got alternative ways, but we will still do the traditional ways, because as we know that trade between nations grow nations, and between people and partners, it creates magnificent relationships, whether it be with Australia and India, or whether it be India and Europe, or whether it be with America and Australia. It does not matter which relationship it is. Relationships grow nations. And by having that collaboration and that relationship together, we're not just growing together, but we can also grow the global production of any type of commodity. So, as I said beforehand, a lot of nations have said we're going to take a step back, and currently, specifically today here in Australia, it's voting for our next prime minister. But one of the campaign slogans, or one of the campaign topics, has been jobs. And right at the bottom, I've said jobs, jobs, jobs. And of course, that is part and parcel of what agriculture does. You need pickers, you need farmers, you need the logistics to drive from one location to the next, whether it be from the farm to a silo, or whether it be from the silo to the port that needs to transport it from the port, then onto the ship. The ship then goes to the another port. It gets off the ship, gets onto another trailer, and then goes to another silo. It's packaged, and then it's to our supermarkets, and then to our door. Through that, a lot of nations are saying we're going to take a step back from globalization, and that we're going to have everything homegrown. And that, of course, brings that security supply chain, that the connection now is home, that they can control it a lot greater. But there's still something missing, of course. Still something missing. But with that being said, they're bringing jobs home. But that means if we think about it, if we have highly skilled individuals in a different country now not able to produce for another country, well, that means that we've just taken jobs from one location to the next to the other. But of course, we're having a step back, and we're saying, because your country is now going to produce, such as, for example, wheat, Australia's put up their hand, as well as India's put up their hand. So it is a win-win in that way. But at the same time, we can also trade with each other. We can trade the same commodity and have the same benefit and have the same quality as well. So, but as well, we need to think about, with those jobs, education is there. And as I said, education is key, because some countries can only specialize and be experts in particular commodities. Here in Australia, we've got wool, we've got iron and ore, whether it be the iron ore of 62%, or whether it be pet coke, or whether it be wheat, or even wines. We need to understand that education, of course, is key, and with education, we get experts. By having experts in particular fields, then we can move people from one location to the next to say, well, we can educate you. And that's one aspect and one key as well for self-reliance, as well as being able to be open, is to collaborate, as well as to find the value between that collaboration. Because collaboration, of course, we can have a great collaboration, but then no value can be created. Or we can make sure that value is created through that collaboration, through our experts, through, of course, agreements and disagreements, to find a solution for both parties, for both nations, or even multiple nations. So it's asking that question and asking that, how can we help you, and how can you help me? By asking those type of questions through even experts, or even on the lowest from the lowest part of the hierarchy, we'll say to farmers, how can a farmer help another farmer out? Well, that's where, as I said earlier, cooperative farming. We've noticed that a lot of the large producers, when there's change that requires to happen, well, it's similar to that of the Suez Canal incident with that ship. It takes a long time to maneuver it. But these cooperative farmers, whether they are small producers or even medium-sized producers, well, they can tackle the large producers, as well as their quality is a lot better, because it's not about the quantity. But the quantity will come when the collaboration of all farmers, or the small farmers and medium farmers, come together. They'll even be able to beat sometimes the large farmers. They'll be able to maneuver them a lot quicker with cooperative farming, agriculture networking, as well as the collaboration of technology as smart AI or smart farming. Now, we're going to take a bit of a step back here, and we're going to talk about each stage of the supply chain. And why do we talk about that? Well, we talk about that for one reason. To be able to understand the whole picture, we must be able to understand each picture. Because when we understand each part, it's very important, because we can see the value in each part, from on the ground, boots on the ground type of individuals, to the individuals that are transporting, to where the grain, or whether it be the product is stored, the product being stored onto a container ship, the container ship shipping it to another place, and then the reverse happening, but instead it going to supermarkets, then to your table. All parts can produce great value. And how can we do that? Well, it's like, how can I say, breaking apart a watch. And why I bring that up? Well, we understand that one cog in the watch, well, that moves one dial, or one complication. And if we remove that complication, then the whole entire watch doesn't work. Well, it's similar to that of the supply chain or the commodity chain. If we don't grow a particular product, or if we remove logistics, or we remove the container ship, which is still part of logistics, or we remove a farmer, or we remove something, it's either doesn't start or it starts to break down. Now, it's very easy to say that we can create value from just one particular part, but that's not the case. We can create value from every single part of the supply chain. How do we do that? Well, it's very simple. We have to break it apart, and we can do it very easily. We need AI right now to be able to analyze the temperatures of whether it's going to be a heat wave or not. We can now understand when the wind is going to pick up. So that helps with, if we want to go into smart farming, we know that we can produce great wind energy, or whether it be solar energy, for smart farming. So it's sustainable. At the same time, we know what the rainfall is going to be like. We can estimate it. We can say that, okay, it's going to drop 100 millimeters of rain today. It's not going to do that tomorrow, but then we can analyze that. Then we can also analyze the soil, what its absorption rate is, as well as we can analyze the soil itself. Can it produce what we want it to produce? Is it healthy? Do we have to do anything about it? If we do, what do we need to do? So even before we start planting and start saying, just throwing us the seeds into the ground, we can understand already where the value can come from. And that's even before we've talked about the other parts. With tracking, to make sure that there's food safety, we got to have a standard. But it's difficult if we're going through bit by bit. It's like if we wanted to count rice, or better yet, all the sand in the world, it would be very impossible, or we would take a very long time. But if we've got the technology, such as digital twin, then we can say, okay, this area, this particular farmer, he can produce very high quality soybean, but he only can produce about, we'll say, 10,000 metric tons per month. But there's a lot of nations that are wanting 200,000. Well, then we can analyze and say, hey, hang on a minute, you can produce this quality, and there's a guy up north, he can produce the same, but maybe it's only 20, maybe it's less, maybe it's 5,000 tons. But they're totally two different farmers could speak to each other and say, well, let's collaborate, let's have a co-op. And right then and there, they can find the closest and the best way of getting that product to each other. To say, okay, we're going to collaborate, we're going to create a co-op. Okay, we've understood that your quality is the same as my quality. Let's do it. And right then and there, we've created another value connection. From being able to say that, well, the quality that you're producing and the quality that someone else is producing, the co-op is already producing value even before they've sold their product. And now we can include logistics. Well, it's always the right time, right place, at the right price. Now, being a fan of logistics, as I find it fascinating, as I can get something from Europe to Australia in a week, where it would have taken months and months if I was back in the, we'll say, 50s. Now it's only a matter of days. Now with logistics, we can now analyze and track how the product goes from one location to the next. But as well, what we can do is, well, let's track the product inside the container and see how much damage it does. How much damage the container has done to the product. Because there'll be times where a buyer will say, well, we will only accept about 2% that is damaged, for example, for soybean. Well, how do you track that? What happens if the container was able to say, well, it's going to, we'll say, damage only about 0.5% of the product? Or better yet, what happens if the container, and I'll use the example of Rolls-Royce, with their SUV, it will be able to analyze the potholes when it's driving. And so it will adjust the suspension. So what happens if we added that to the container? Again, that's value right there. You're now saying that I can transport my product, it'll be less damage, as well as by having it not damaged, the quality is perfect. The buyer's saying, well, I'm not getting 2% damage, I'm only getting not even 0.5%, maybe it's 0.01% of my product is being damaged, meaning that I can sell a lot more. Then as well, to produce that technology, well, you got to have steel, you got to have the creators that can code. Right then and there, you're creating more value. And that part where it's, again, going back to that watch analogy, breaking it apart, breaking whether it be the commodity or the process down into different cogs and into different mechanisms, you can now understand how just one part of the commodity chain can create so much value. And of course, I'm just using crude, as oil is just one of those things that we need. Even with crude, even though we're stepping away a bit from the agriculture, talking about crude just for a quick moment. Well, we need experts. We need experts to understand that this is where we're going to drill. This is how we're going to actually build the machinery to drill the hole to produce the oil. How do we know that this area is going to be the place that we can get oil from? Or whether it be this is the ship that we can actually move across and actually hold the oil. Can the ship not be damaged if there's any high winds, high waves when it's going from one nation to the next? And then we've got to go to the refinery. Well, is the refinery safe? How have we produced it? Can it analyze the oil properly? Do we need to say blend the product? How do we blend it? Is it 2%? Is it 3%? Is it 10%? Whatever it may be. That's more experts, more education. And even during that whole entire process, even before it gets into your tank, you've already produced a ton of value through just that. And we have not even said, well, because there's nations that want to say, well, we need it ASAP. We need it as soon as possible at our doorstep. Well, then we have to make sure that we've got to call the right people. We know that, and from my experience, it's a very tricky place to move forward, as there'll be people that will say, well, I've got the product, but then it's 5 phone calls later or 5 text messages later, and they actually don't have the product. So relying upon intermediaries that are reliable, like really reliable, that have the experience, and those are necessary. Those are very, very necessary, because if they aren't there, the trap is set. There will be people out there that will get you. And we've seen that multiple times throughout our trading process at GOC. But as we see from this diagram, we can see that there's several parts to it. Not just in agriculture, but also in oil, but in any type of commodity. We can see that all parts of the commodity chain, we can find value, and we can add technology. We can add that which we wouldn't have thought that we could add 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But we go back and say, well, again, going back to education. But why is it key? Well, of course, we need information technology. We are truly living in a digital age. We can create universes through the metaverse and be able to say, using digital twins, saying, well, this is how it's going to be when we transport this product to this product, or how when we reproduce this, when we're going to say that wind, if it goes to, we'll say 50 kilometers and then up it to 100 kilometers, what is it going to do to the crops? And now we've taken truly a step back from even the whole entire commodity chain, talking about the start. We're really talking about the start of where we can produce the most value, and that's education. Educating, it's not just about educating the farmers, but it's educating the farmers' sons, the daughters, the ones that are going to say, well, I'm working so hard to produce the crops so I can get you into university, like Shobhit University, and be able to say, well, I'm working hard, and then all of a sudden comes back, theoretically, coming back and saying, well, I want to make sure that my father or the farmer that has helped me go through university, I want to give back. I've studied technology. And how I'm going to make sure that we're going to have a good life or make sure that double the income is that by making sure the soil is perfect, making sure that when we can automate a farm, make sure that when it comes to a certain day, when it's extremely humid, more water to the ground to make sure, and we've got that. And is the water healthy? Is it too much salt in it, or is it dirty? How do we filter it out? Okay, so we use more technology to make sure that the viscosity of the water is perfect. But again, education is only one aspect of the commodity value chain. Because even if you've got it at the start, middle, or end, you still got to produce something. You still got to move something, and you still got to be able to eat something. So education is just part and parcel of what we can do with the value chain. It's still part of the foundation, but it's just one aspect of the foundation. Of course, that's, as I said and mentioned, education and AI. I can't code for myself, but people that do code, they're highly educated. And that opens great avenues, not just to produce petrochemicals, but as well as taking a step back and producing what is one of the most fundamental things that we need, and that's food. Whether it be soybean, whether it be wheat, whether it be cacao, whether it be corn, whether it be the delicious coffee, or whether it be tea. Education is needed if we want to have those smart farms. Whether we want to create, we'll say, requiring the energy to produce the smart farms, well, we might need to go more, we want sustainability. We want to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. So how do we do that? Well, we've got education, we've got AI to be able to say, hey, we want to make sure that this automated farm is truly green. How do we do that? Well, we've got to have wind energy, or maybe we've got to have solar, or maybe we can use, maybe we can use water, or we can use thermodynamics. Whatever it may be, the energy that we want to go green with, there's a possibility, but it's always education that will reign supreme. We'll come in and say, hey, you got to be able to learn this before. It is learn to crawl before you can walk, before you can run. And as I said earlier, with trusted intermediaries, well, that comes the networks. And we know with networks and management, we know how some people aren't good with networking. Some people aren't good at managing. They know how to produce, and they can talk your ear off with how to produce whatever the commodity is. But they have no clue of how to network. They have no clue how to manage relationships. They can look at managing the big picture of making sure that all the crops, all the agriculture is absolutely perfect. That the quality of it is perfect. But what about the finer details? Finer details sometimes that gets lost And this is where I've come and realized that a lot of the large players, they are looking at the big picture that they can produce millions upon millions of tons per year, and it won't affect them. But how do they manage their quality? Where's the quality assurance? Where's the food safety? Where's the food security? Where is the sudden agility and speed that they can say, well, we're going to change it up. Why are we going to change it up? Well, rain is not going to be predicted until a month later. How can they change up? Well, they can't really. They've committed. But that's when we've got the smaller ones, smaller producers. They've got the agility, and they've got the speed. But hang on a minute, they're missing in that other part, what the large guys have, networking. Now, that's where, again, you've got intermediaries that can bring together that moment. That's where e-commerce, a perfect example of e-commerce, comes in. That's why we've got WhatsApp, where we can call up very quickly from, we'll say, from Europe, France, for instance, from a guy in Australia that says, well, we're producing olives. We need olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Can you guys produce it? It's like, yes, we can. Oh, we need X amount of metric tons. And ready, they've already got an order. And if we did it a different way, we wouldn't be able to do that. If we did it the traditional way, we'd have to fly one person to the other, speak to the other, and then he would bring himself to the product, say that, oh yeah, we're going to produce that, test the product, fly all the way back, get the order, fly all the way back. Long process. With technology, we're able to very quickly say, well, we've got this product. We can show you it. We can even have a video call or have even a seminar saying, well, we've got this product. This is the best. Here it is. They can even able to show how the soil is, what the water is going to be like. Be able to show it to the end customer and say, well, this is how it's going to be. But again, of course, that requires data, large amounts of data. So the agility and speed is one thing. Data is another. Managing is another. And the other part is networks. Because without networks, we can't have what we have right now. Networking is how we've created massive amounts of trade. Is knowing one person that knows another has the product. And through that, even that small chain that's managed, we can produce results very quickly. But we live in a day and age now that it's agility, speed, maneuverability. If we're not able to maneuver, as one of the guys from Shark Tank, if you can't pivot, then you're gone. And that's similar to that of farmers. If you can't pivot in such a way, well, you're going to lose half your crops or, part of your crops. With the value in that, whether it be the time invested, the infrastructure that's being put in place, whether it be 10% or whether it be 60%, you've lost. But being able to be agile, being able to find that speed, being able to have those key networks and be able to have those connections of management that requiring that data, well, then anything is possible. And now we lead to the Agri network. As I say here, it's not just about helping farmers with sustainability. With sustainability, of course, we want to make sure that, how can I say? What we want to make sure is that it's green. And that because of it going green, whether it be organic, whether it be we're producing non-GMO product, we want to make sure that it's helping every single part of the supply chains. And by creating that value through each part of the supply chain, we're not just helping farmers out, we're helping communities out. Now, what does it mean by the community? Well, we could say the community of just soybean, the logistics. We could say the community of steel that is required to produce the pipes that are required to be used for the sprinkler systems, or to produce the tractors, or whether it be for the tankers. So all those parts, and all those communities thrive. Now, having that agriculture network, whether it be the e-commerce, or whether it be having networks on your phone, or whether it be just having regular old networks from universities, for example, when you integrate it with technology, when e-commerce really is connected with each farmer, whether it be like with the small farmers, SME farmers, they have a greater reach, and that does equal greater success. It truly creates greater success is because now they can call up very quickly. They can put their commodity online a lot quicker, sell it a lot faster, and be able to move it a lot quicker than what guys can do when they're looking at, we'll say, 500,000 amounts of tons of whatever the product is. With the large farmers, they have to negotiate. They have to make sure that they're selling it to the right people. Then they have to make sure that the government approve it. So all these hoops that they've got to jump through, well, the small agriculture network doesn't have to, or it's a lot less than what would normally be for the large producers. I was told one time by my mentor, network, network, network. But how do we network? It's not taught in university. It's not taught in everyday life. It's not taught in when you get into your own company. How do you network? Well, here's the thing. Networking, you go into a company and you start talking to people. Relationship building. When you go into university, talk to your students. Talk to the teachers. Straight away network like that. Because you don't know who you're going to pick up on the way. Because that is how you will be able to create these Agri networks. Creating platforms like this, creating webinars, creating conferences where there's interaction, where we can have separate rooms to say, well, I'm a buyer, I'm the end buyer, and I know that you've got a product, but how much can you produce? Well, I can produce XYZ. Okay, let's bring another couple, create the co-op, make sure that there's one representative. By creating that one representative, well, that's fantastic. Having that co-op farming and having it as not just as an archipelago. And the reason why I bring up the archipelago is that archipelago is like all these small different islands all over the place. Now, if we've got all these archipelagos that can't communicate with each other, how do we communicate? Well, we pick up the phone. Well, hang on a minute, they don't have the phone. How do we do it? How do we do it online? Well, we can create that platform where we'll say these producers of farmers can produce XYZ. Fantastic. Let's send a friend request. Let's collaborate. And even online, now instead of having it, oh, it's my neighbor, it's another guy on the other side of the country that's producing the same quality and same quantity as me, or even a bit more, maybe a bit less. Now we're in an agreement. We've got an MOU. We've got multiple agreements to say we're going to produce this, you're going to produce that. We'll bring it into the middle, and then we can split the profit. Right then and there. Even though the guys have not even talked to each other in terms of face-to-face, that maybe they've just called each other. Maybe they have something like this, but they haven't met truly face-to-face. But right then and there, you've got that network. And that's just one example of what we have in Agriculture Network. And that's what we can do at even GRC. That's what we do. We create those networks. And that's where you need trusted intermediaries. By having trusted intermediaries that have they have the background, they have the history. Well, I'll put it very simply. When you know that this certain store is able to produce or buys the right set of pants, I know most of you won't, change to a different brand. Same with intermediaries. Once you know that these intermediaries have done it in the past on a regular basis, or maybe it's an irregular basis, but they've got a history. They've got a proven track record that can help you get that network and continue. But as I've said about reliable intermediaries, why they're necessary, why they are the gatekeepers. Well, of course, we haven't built society with we'll say shadowy individuals. We've had trusted intermediaries. We've had trusted and reliable individuals. We've collaborated with greats. We've been able to collaborate through nations. As I've got the picture there, a collaborative network delivering collective impact. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful slogan. Because that is what happens when you've got a great agri network. That is when nature, technology, truly collaborate to one. Through that, that's when we can see even greater value coming from it. That's where we said networking through technology, as I've mentioned earlier, WhatsApp, Viber, Messenger. But then, hang on a minute, how do we know for certain the people that we're talking to are the right people? Well, that's where you've got the reliable intermediaries, such as myself. We're the gatekeepers. We're the ones that say, okay, show us the product. Show us the buyer. Whether it be the seller, whether it be the buyer, the intermediary does all the work of making sure that the end, where the product is going, or where the product has been produced, are real. Because it's very easy online sometimes to trick people. And that's where you've got to do your research. But the producer, the seller, they don't have enough time. They've got to be in the field. They don't have enough time to talk to these people. Well, that's where we say we've got the reliable intermediaries. We've got that extra bucket of guys that, hey, we'll do the work for you. And why? Well, we want to make sure that you're producing for your country. We want to make sure that you're getting the right pay. And we want to make sure as well that the end product is going to the right buyer. And the right buyer and the buyer, he's got the facilities to facilitate the transaction. Because there have been several times in this line of work where a lot of producers have been taken for a ride. And they've lost millions upon millions of dollars because of faulty information, lies, deceitfulness. And it's something that I've seen multiple times with multiple transactions where, because they don't have reliable intermediaries, that they lose the product and they lose their reputation. When you have a specialist intermediary that weeds out the individuals that aren't truly part of the agri network or truly part of the network of commodities, then you're going to lose. That's why you have the intermediaries. Now with Agri AI, we come to here. What is Agri AI? How can AI assist in agriculture? What are the benefits of Agri AI, and why is it now needed more than ever? Well, as Professor Moni said, climate change has been just absolutely decimating crops, and we can see it on the first slide how the heat wave in India, now they have to put a ban on it, on wheat. If we're able to have those AI functionalities, that we're able to have those, we'll say, guardians that can protect us, those digital guardians. And why I say that? Well, we can now understand how the weather is going to be in about a month's time. We can prepare for it. We do that with flooding. We make sure that we have floodgates. We make sure that things are clean. We make sure canals are built in such a way that they either block the water in a certain way. AI helps that. Back in the day, we would just say, well, we're going to build a meter-high concrete wall. Well, that's not going to do much. Nowadays, we go, well, we can make it, the wall will be curved when, we'll say, the waves come in, because we know that the splashing effect will drift it away a lot better. As well as we'll put these things called dragon teeth to make sure that it cuts up the wave even before it hits the beach. Just for example, for that. That's what AI can do. It can predict things that we would never think of. That's why we need it, because there's moments where we as humans can't predict the things of nature, but AI can. It can give us a greater warning system that we have never thought of. And why we need it more than ever is because there's warnings coming every second now. And even that creates value through making sure that by having the right AI, by having it, we'll say, knowing what the temperature is in the ground to what it is in the air, we can now use the right amount of water.
Mr. Andrew, can you just speed up?
Yes, we'll do, Professor. With Agri AI, well, the solution is part of the missing link of what we got. And as we've seen, small co-ops, as I mentioned, small co-ops, if we add AI and plus effective logistics, well, it equals success for all of us. And as I said before, small co-ops move quicker. They create more value for the chain. With large co-ops, of course, they create value. But that being said, they move like a tanker ship. It's going to take forever. So with Agri AI, we can see that how it's currently now the missing link. Now, why I've had this? Well, artisans back in the day, with the assistance of the right networks and right technology, well, we can create that. We've got that capacity, and we've got the networks now ever in place. It's just creating that linkage, starting the fire. And I've put up a comment: the father, the traditionalist; the son, the technologist. Engage and collaborate. Well, I can use for India, where it still has the father that's traditional. Oh, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. But the son, of course, will say, oh no, we've got technology, we can do it the modern way. But that's also what we can do. We can collaborate greater between father and son, where the methods of tradition can be updated to the modern, and we can make, we'll say, agriculture double. It just captures the attention of the whole entire community. Sorry. And I've come up with a couple of things with what we can do. As I mentioned, we can do with efficient tracking systems. We can make sure that where the product comes from, the ground where it's produced, we can create that efficient tracking system to be able to say, well, I can get it from one location to the next, and I can track the whole entire process. And that enterprise or resource planning of how agile are you, we can track that as well. We can see how agile the small co-ops are. traceability and responsibility, we can see that. Now we can, as I said, from the table of, well, we've got a bunch of seeds on our table. How can we produce it? To the consumer. Well, it's a complex system. So how do we do that? That's when we've got the efficient tracking systems. That's where I said where we can say that with the right container ships, where they can see the bumpy road or how the how the container ships can shake it all up. Well, we can make sure that the product is now 100% secure, that we can move the product without having it damaged. That's fantastic. There's another thing that I've also come up with is, of course, well, collaboration in nations of farming and bring technology. Like, you bring the technology, I bring the agri know-how. But then we can say this. Let's change it and have vertical farming. There's three commodities that are the most difficult of vertical farming. Those are wheat, soybean, and cacao, because they require large amounts of water and they require large amounts of energy. Now, how do we do that? Well, we can go with solar panels if we wanted to produce that. But hang on a minute, solar panels aren't as efficient as they are. One thing that Global Opportunities Commercialization have just recently collaborated with is a wind provider that provides wind technology and provides energy with a vertical wind producer. So we can have vertical farming as well as on top of the farm, vertical wind. That solves the whole entire issue of energy, because that is one of the biggest difficult things, is being able to have vertical farming and the energy that is required to pump out that artificial suns for the crops. How do we do that? Well, what we can do and what we can all collaborate with is the technology that GOC has, where we can say, well, we've got vertical farming. And it's a win-win situation, as well as that, of course, crops will grow vertically. Now, right at the end of my presentation, I must add this, that Global Opportunities Commercialization's trading platform, that we provide the intermediary service. We provide sellers, we provide buyers, we collaborate with sellers' mandates, we are our buyers' mandates. There's three segments that we are mainly attached to. That's energy, agriculture, and metals. And of course, we've done healthcare, where we've done with COVID-19 vaccines for Asian countries and with African countries, as well as here in Australia, whether for products of PPE. So we've been able to brokerage multiple transactions through our global network. And we are gladly to take on any and all your needs, as we are the gatekeepers to make sure that you are secure, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are secure, because we're only able to have great relationships, reliable relationships, when we have the assurance of that the intermediaries are looking after your needs. So I really thank you so much, Professor Moni, for giving me this opportunity to speak at the platform.